Everything alternative, Radio Felician the Falcon. It's your girl Kristin the Bombel. As promised, I got the chance to speak with Jeffrey Lewis, who's set to play the Williams Center alongside his band The Voltage this Sunday. For more info, check out williamscenter.com. And now, a bunch of questions I got to ask Jeffrey while he's on the road between concerts. Your music is described as mind-spinning indie rock slash folk art with multimedia illustrated cartoon songs mixed in. So obviously these genres in itself are all very diverse. They have different meanings and approaches. So I'm just curious, how do you navigate them and incorporate those genres into, your music and your work?
Well, I basically just gravitate towards things that I get personally excited about. And I think just naturally I'm, wanting to be involved in the things that get me the most worked up and, inspired. So for me, that's always been comic books and drawing and certain historical topics. The history of communism I'm particularly interested in, so that finds its way into some of my work. And then, of course, musically, there's just so many records that I'm so into, and so many artists that I love, that I just kind of course, want to try to do stuff that makes me feel the way so many of those artists have made me feel. So that brings me into stuff in the realms of, Daniel Johnston, who's probably my biggest inspiration overall for making home recordings and very straightforward songs. And then also a lot of artists that I'm inspired by, from, The Fall, the Violent Femmes, television personalities, Woody Guthrie, Patti Smith. There's just, everybody sort of can come up with their own list of their own personal favorite artists, musically and artistically. And for me, I think that's kind of they end up trying to make. And it's, if some of it is more, maybe some of it's funny and some of it's sad and some of it is I just kind of throw everything in there, and I try not to filter myself in terms of like what goes into this band.
Wow. Yeah, so it sounds like you have so many different, you know, passions because hearing you speak about all those things, it's so good to just have that balance of things that motivate you. And I'm a firm believer in, like, you always have to be loving your passions. And it sounds like I said, you have so many different areas where you gravitate those passions into your work. So that sounds really interesting, and also sounds like you always have some kind of, like I said, motivator to keep you going. And I guess that leads me into my second question, which is that you started off in 1998 recording music with cassettes, which I was born in 2002, so I'm not totally familiar with cassettes, but I've tried in my time here at Radio Felician to kind of work with them. But now, during the pandemic, you digitally self-released 3 DIY albums from your apartment. Obviously, those two occurrences are, totally different, require you to work differently with different kinds of technologies. So would you say, like, despite the circumstances of both times, like, what would you say was an easier process? Like, would you have rather make music, the old way from 1998, or would you rather prefer the newer technologies that we have today?
Well, there's something incredible about the ease of releasing music nowadays. If I'm just doing a digital release, like I've been doing the last few years, just experimenting with not manufacturing any physical copies, whereas in the old days when I was starting out, of course, I was spending quite a lot of time just at the tape deck, hitting record, making a copy of my tape, taking it out, flipping it over to the blank side, making a copy of the other side, photocopying the tape cover, folding it up, and making a whole little package that I could sell to people. And then, at a certain point, that transitioned into making CDs, making vinyls, and all of that stuff takes a certain amount of physical labor and a certain amount of money and planning and how many of these should I make? And nowadays, I've just been, I still do that sort of thing, making my physical comic books and CDs and records, but I've also been messing around with just putting stuff up digitally. Sometimes I'll put something on Bandcamp, sometimes I'll put something up on streaming, and it's just been fun. There's just options of how to do these things. For me, it eliminates the artwork element, which is unfortunate because I always used to have a lot of fun playing around with what I could do artistically with the packages. So every time somebody bought one of my tapes, there was a little comic book inside that would fold out. And I would try to do different fun things with the CD packaging where there might be holes cut in the front so that different ways you put the artwork in, you would see different stuff through the holes and you could put it in to get different messages or fold it out in different ways. And I used to put a lot of effort into coming up with weird physical packages, and the digital realm doesn't involve that. And that's kind of sad for me because I love making comic books and I love making these physical projects. But the recordings themselves are, still something that I can do very quickly and easily. And whenever I write a song, and I try to write songs pretty regularly, whenever I write a song, it's still very easy to just, whether it's on my phone or whatever way I have of just anything I can do where I can put one finger on one button and be like, okay, record. Now I'm just going to play this song. That's the recording. I'm done. It's finished. That's a recording of the song. So something that is super simple is, that's still available. In the old days, that might have been on a tape. It might have been on a 4-track. It might have been at a friend's apartment. Nowadays, it might just be into my phone. It might be on the laptop. But I still really like the idea of just writing a song and just pushing one button and being like, here's me playing this song. That's it. It's done. Nothing fancy about it. And that's really something that Daniel Johnston taught me and inspired me to do. Because before I had heard Daniel Johnston's recordings, I wasn't really aware that there was such a thing as music that could be so unprocessed. It's almost like the difference between like picking an apple right off the tree versus getting like a processed packaged piece of food from a supermarket that has a million ingredients and has been through all this processing. There's something about the directness of a fresh recording of a song that just sounds and feels different to me as a listener. And it's obviously so easy to do. And that just blew my mind when I found Daniel Johnston's recordings. It really changed my whole concept of what I had thought about what music was and what songs were and how you could record them and put them in the world. So I really feel like I owe Daniel kind of my whole career, my whole idea of making songs. My whole life would just have been so different if I had discovered his stuff when I did in my early 20s, when I had that inspiration to start making songs and record them that way.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like there's a bit of like pros and cons, I guess, that comes with both. And that was so cool. So you said like in the with the cassettes, like there was like a little like comic that you put in there. I love like the dedication, so it shows like there's a both, like I said, both have their pros and cons, but what matters is like, the dedication that you put into it for, your fans, people that want to listen. So that's honestly very, admirable. And, I heard that, you have 90,000 monthly Spotify listeners, which is super incredible, 30 million streams worldwide. So it seems like you do have so many people that admire, your work and all that you do for music, all around the world. So I want to know, I guess, like what do you think it is about your music that resonates with so many people across so many different platforms, countries, ages, like different demographics? Like what do you think resonates the most, or what at least do you hope resonates the most with everyone?
When I was first making these songs and these cassettes, my dream was just to be able to reach the kind of level that Daniel Johnston had, where the cassettes just took on a life of their own, and people that heard them, if they got something out of them, if they related to it, or if they liked the songs, they could make a copy of the tape and give it to another friend, and it could just circulate in this very organic way that really had nothing to do with the music industry and had nothing to do with being in stores or having music videos or having any of the kind of official infrastructure of like a professional band. It would just be based on people actually liking the songs and wanting their other friends to hear the songs. And that was how Daniel Johnston's music seemed to get around. And I just thought that was so cool. And that's kind of all I ever wanted, was if I could just make songs that were so, somehow felt powerful to me because they were, or if they were funny, or if they were sad, or, whatever kind of creativity. And that was also something I really got from the early Ween recordings. The first few albums that the band Ween made just have this very homemade sound where you really get the sense that it's just two people having fun recording whatever they feel like recording at home with whatever equipment they can put together. And it just makes you feel like, oh, I want to try doing that. That really seems like a lot of fun. So yeah, that kind of inspiration was what I wanted to get involved with doing. It just seemed like such a great creative process. And I was so lonely and I didn't really have much of a social life. And it was just like a way to spend time in addition to drawing comic books. And the fact that nowadays everything has kind of transitioned and evolved with technology, from when I was starting out in the late 90s into the 2000s with, nowadays, the fact that you can even look on a streaming service and see exactly how many listeners an artist has and how many people are listening per month and which songs they're listening to. And it's almost like the same thing in the way that like people can just spread the stuff around and send a track to their other friends if they want people to check it out. And, it's very cool and interesting for me to just see how this really has kind of snowballed and people do seem to like this stuff. But it's also quite weird to me that it's not, it's like, oh, if that many people like it, then why don't more people like it? Or, no matter what it is, there's always something weird about it. It's like, if it's likable, then it seems like more people would like it. And if it's not likable, then it seems that less people would like it. And I've always just been in this sort of like weird little middle area. I'm incredibly glad that people are listening and people are coming to shows. I mean, wherever I go and play a concert, there's people that come to see the show, even if it's, it might be 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, maybe 200 people at a big show. But it's definitely a handful of people everywhere. So over time, the stuff has really gotten out there. And that just makes me so happy and so proud that it really is kind of the dream that I wanted, like Daniel Johnston, to just put stuff out there and that it would just continue to circulate.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, like as a listener, because I mainly use Spotify to get my music, and you mentioned the statistics and how it's interesting that you see those numbers. And for me, as like a listener of many artists that I listen to, the one thing I like is I like to personally look at their statistics because it kind of shows me the community that kind of comes with the music. And you kind of almost feel supported in a way. Like, I don't know any of these people, but like I know that there's a community of people that have appreciation for this artist. And that in itself is a beautiful thing. I think no matter how many listeners you have. And I know also a lot of people that listen to music like to gatekeep their artists. So you would think like, hey, why don't people share it around? But it's also people are like, no, like they are my artists, like no one else can listen to them, like they are mine only. So it has, like I said, it's pros and cons. And you're like, dang, like why is no one sharing it around? But also it's like, it could maybe like feel good in a way to think like, hey, like people have that kind of feelings and appreciation for what you do. So that community is so amazing. And speaking of community with your band, I know that your band is like a 4-piece type of group. So how did you guys kind of meet, and what drew you guys together? Like, do you guys work well, and like what just made you guys click and say, hey, like I want to do this, we have a dream, let's take off with it?
I've had a lot of different people in my band over the years because I've been doing this for so many years, and I don't really expect anybody to devote their life to running around playing my songs forever. So My brother was probably the longest member of the band. My brother Jack played bass with me since we started out, and he toured with me for many years. But then he moved across the country, and we, I've had a number of different bass players. Currently, I have Isabel Martin on bass, and I have Mallory Foyer on keyboard and violin, and I have Brent Cole on drums. And these are all people that I've known for a few years, but they haven't all been in the band that whole time. It's kind of a combination of people that I've known, but I've had a number of different drummers, a number of different bass players, and it really is asking a lot of people to be able to go on tour because, people have plants, they have dogs and cats, some people have kids, relationships, jobs. So to ask people to drop everything for 2 weeks and run around traveling, some people just don't have that ability in their schedule to be that flexible. So it really is kind of based on availability more than anything else. So if somebody has a job that's flexible enough that allows them to come on tour or any situation like that, then hopefully we'll be able to forge a musical relationship. And I have a lot of songs to learn. So every time there's a new person playing music in the band, it's like, oh, let's start out learning these 50 songs. And then once we all know how to play these, we'll add another 20 songs. And, I like to pick between a lot of different material at the different gigs. So we play different stuff every night. And everybody that's in my band at this point, we really know quite a lot of songs that we can do together. So that makes it super fun.
Yeah, no, it definitely is such a big commitment, like you said, because everyone always has so much going on, life doesn't stop. So, but that's incredible that, you have, your people right now and that you've had that, throughout your career and your touring journey. So that's so very important. And, I wish you guys so much luck on, your tour. I have one more question for you. And I want to know, so your song, The Story of Sitting Bull, won a Webby Award, so awesome, by the way, for best writing on the internet. So do you want to talk about the inspiration behind that project and like how did it feel to receive such a recognition like a Webby Award?
Well, the historical illustrated songs that I've been doing, where usually in my gigs I might do a couple of these illustrated songs per night, and I've got quite a lot of them now. And I had been interested in certain historical topics, uh, like I was mentioning, like the history of communism is something I was interested in because my family was all very involved in those left-wing politics. My grandparents, my parents, my aunts and uncles. There was a lot of literature about communism and social movements around the house when I was growing up. And I was just very curious about what that history was because America has usually been so against those kinds of ideas, anti-communist, anti-socialist. So it was very confusing to me as to like what the actual story was of what happened. Like, why do some people support these ideas? Some people are so against these ideas. So I started just trying to research for myself and learn about some of these things and like, what was the Cuban Revolution? What was the Russian Revolution? Who were these people? What did they do? And I feel like the stories were just so interesting to me and just so fascinating. The sacrifices that people made and the huge upheavals of the 20th century that I just started realizing that, this could be really great material to do in a concert. I just felt like these are stories that people maybe hadn't heard or that I was excited about that I wanted to tell other people about. So I started doing these historical things, and I was contacted at a certain point by the History Channel. After I'd been doing this for a few years, I got an email from somebody that was working on creating content for the History Channel website, and they wanted to see if I'd be interested in doing certain topics that they needed for their website where they had sort of gaps in their information, or there were certain topics that the History Channel felt like were not represented enough on their website, and they knew that I did these historical song projects. So they gave me a whole list of topics and they were like, would you be able to pick some of these topics that you might want to do songs about or do your illustrated song projects about? So that was where some of the stuff like the story of Sitting Bull and the story of the French Revolution and other ones that I did at that time were based on working with the History Channel and picking the topics from their list that I thought I had the most personal interest in out of the whole list of topics that they wanted to have material on. And then some of those made sense for me to do in my own concerts. So when I perform my own concerts, I do some of the work that I had done for those History Channel projects, including the story of Sitting Bull. Sometimes I'll perform that one live, and that's that one that I think that one came out particularly good, and I was glad that somebody recognized that. I had never heard of the Webby Awards, but it was nice that somebody, because I did feel like that was one that I really felt proud of how that writing project came out. I think that's one of my better historical songs, and I find that story very moving and powerful. So I was glad that somebody had recognized that in some way.
Yeah, no, and to hear that the History Channel recognized it is really awesome because the History Channel is so, well known by many, many people throughout the world. So for them to, you know, reach out to you, like I said, is another accomplishment in itself. And like so you're the way you're incorporating like history and how as a kid, your curiosity. That's like such an interesting like way to kind of go about this and just for inspiration. You know, I think that's so cool. And I hope you enjoyed the questions that I talked about with you today. And thank you for giving me the time to speak with you. This was such an incredible opportunity. And I wish you the best of luck, in your future career endeavors. And hopefully that you get to Florida safely. And yeah.
Well, thanks so much. It's really nice to have the chance to talk, and hopefully people come to our show in Rutherford, New Jersey on Sunday. We're playing at the Den at the Williams Center. That's actually the last gig on our tour. We're on our way home from New York City at that point. So it's Sunday, April 21st at the Den at the Williams Center in Rutherford, New Jersey. Last gig on our tour, and it's really a good opportunity for me to be able to do this program with you. So I totally appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for all the great questions.
Radio Felician University.